Audrey, a 30-year-old single mother, brings her 6-year-old daughter Lily to a family reunion at her parents' lake house after years of estrangement. Despite her apprehensions, she hopes Lily can have a relationship with her grandparents and Uncle Derek. However, the toxic family dynamic quickly resurfaces. Audrey's parents remain critical and cold, while Derek, the golden child, is arrogant and dismissive. During a family breakfast, Lily innocently sings aloud, annoying Derek. In a shocking outburst, Derek crosses the room and slaps Lily hard across the face. The family minimizes the violence. Audrey's father justifies it as discipline, and her mother laughs it off. Audrey is horrified but finds unexpected support in Paul, a relative, filming a documentary about the family who secretly provides her an audio recording of the entire incident. Audrey quickly gathers Lily and leaves the lake house despite her parents' attempts to gaslight and threaten her financially. This event becomes a turning point for Audrey. The recording serves as proof leading to real-world consequences. Derek is demoted at work, loses his social standing, and his marriage eventually dissolves. The family fractures along moral lines, with some relatives reaching out to support Audrey. In the months that follow, Audrey rebuilds her life and empowers Lily to heal. Lily regains her confidence and joy, symbolized by her singing freely again. Audrey establishes strong boundaries with her parents and engages in therapy for herself and Lily. She also finds professional success and begins helping others by speaking about family toxicity. The story closes on a hopeful note, Audrey and Lily, supported by a chosen community of friends and family who truly care for them, reclaim peace and self-worth, showing that breaking cycles of abuse can lead to genuine healing. I drove away from that lake house with my knuckles white on the steering wheel, Lily asleep in the back seat, her cheek still marked by the outline of Derek's hand. My mind raced, but my body felt numb. I couldn't believe how quickly everything had unraveled, how fast my parents and Derek had stripped away the thin illusion of family I'd clung to. Their laughter still rang in my ears, that smug certainty they'd always get away with their cruelty. But this time it was different. This time I had proof. At a red light, I glanced at Lily in the rearview mirror. She was curled into herself, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Her face peaceful in sleep, but her little body tense like she was bracing even in her dreams. That image cut me deeper than anything my family had ever said to me. It lit something in me, a fire sharp and bright. I wouldn't let them write this off as a misunderstanding. Not this time. For too long they'd relied on silence and appearances, but I was done protecting their reputation at the expense of my own child's well-being. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I pulled into a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town. Lily stirred when I unbuckled her, blinking up at me with those wide blue eyes. "Are we okay, Mommy?" she asked, her voice small and raw. I kissed her forehead. "We're better than okay, baby. We're going to fix this." Inside, I ordered us pancakes even though neither of us was hungry. While Lily colored on the paper placemat, I pulled out my phone and texted Paul. "Do you still have the recordings from this weekend?" He replied almost instantly. "Yes. Everything from the wireless mics." "Audrey, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize what I was capturing until it was too late. Can you send me the files?" I wrote back. "Of course, sending now." A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with the files, crisp audio of Derek's slap. My father's cold remark about learning shame, my mother's cruel laugh. I plugged in my earbuds and listened, feeling sick, but also vindicated. The weight of this truth sat heavy in my chest, but it also steadied me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't exaggerating. This was real. It always had been. I emailed the files to myself, labeled them carefully, and uploaded them to cloud storage. I knew my family well enough to know they'd try to spin this erase it, pretend it didn't happen, but this time I was ready. As we drove home, Lily fell back asleep, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. I thought about what came next. A report to Child Protective Services, maybe, but I knew how slippery my family was, how easily they'd manipulate the narrative. My father was a respected attorney, my brother a corporate VP, my mother entrenched in local charities. To the outside world, they were untouchable. No, I needed to think strategically. At home, I tucked Lily into bed and sat quietly in the dark living room. The apartment was small, but it was ours, and that meant something now. Every object, every chipped mug, every slightly lopsided photo frame was a symbol of a life I'd built on my own, a life I could protect. I remembered something Tara had said once: you can't win a rigged game by playing by the rules. That thought stayed with me as I began planning. The first step wasn't to confront them directly, it was to gather everything. Every time they'd undermined me, every cruel comment, every subtle humiliation I'd shrugged off over the years. I spent most of that night going through old emails, texts, even social media posts. It was all there if you knew where to look. Snide remarks disguised as jokes, passive-aggressive digs at my parenting, public praises of Derek at my expense. And then I found it a photo from 2 years ago at another family gathering. Lily was standing near Derek, and he had a hand on her shoulder. She was smiling nervously, but looking slightly away, her body tilted just a bit as if leaning away from him even then. The image hit me hard. Had she felt unsafe around him all this time, and I just hadn't seen it? That's when the next idea formed, something risky but necessary. I would make this public. Not a courtroom drama, not yet. No, I would start where their power was their reputation, their image. The next morning, I called Paul. "How do you feel about finishing that documentary?" I asked. He hesitated. "Audrey, I don't know if that's a good idea. Your dad was funding most of it." "I'll cover your costs," I interrupted. "You already have all the footage. You told me yourself my father wanted authenticity." "Well, let's give it to him." Paul was quiet for a long moment. "You're serious? Dead serious?" A small chuckle. "You always did have more backbone than they gave you credit for." We made a plan. He would edit a short video, just 5 minutes carefully cut, showing the casual cruelty, the slap, the laughter, the minimization afterward. No commentary, just raw, unfiltered truth. While Paul worked on the edit, I reached out to a lawyer. Not a family friend this time, but a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Beth Carter, known for taking on tough family cases. We met for coffee, and I laid everything out, the recording, the years of documented belittlement, the slap my parents' dismissive comments. Beth didn't flinch. "You're right to think about reputation as leverage," she said. "Abuse like this thrives in the dark. You want real accountability? Shine a light." That night, I watched Paul's draft video. It was devastating. Even I, who had lived it, felt my stomach twist. But it was also undeniable. The following morning, I uploaded it to a private link and emailed it to my family. No note, no explanation, just the video. Within an hour, my mother called 3 times. I let it go to voicemail, then my father, then Derek. I didn't answer. Later that afternoon, Natalie, Derek's wife, called me. Her voice was shaking. "Audrey, I just saw it. I had no idea. I don't even know what to say." "Don't say anything," I told her gently. "Just think about what it means to stay married to a man who could do that." By evening, the emails started. Threats, pleas, attempts to gaslight me into doubting my own memory. My father especially fell back on old tactics, invoking family loyalty, accusing me of airing dirty laundry. But I was resolute. The power dynamic had shifted. For the first time, they couldn't deny the truth, and they knew it. Still, I kept my next move quiet. The video was private, shared only with them and a few trusted friends, but I made it clear to Beth that I was prepared to go public if they retaliated in any way. At night, I sat beside Lily as she colored at the kitchen table. She was humming again. Not loudly, not with her usual carefree abandon, but humming nonetheless. "That's a nice song," I said softly. She looked up at me, her expression tentative. "Is it okay if I sing again, Mommy?" I bent down and kissed her hair. "Yes, sweetie. It's always okay for you to sing." Her voice rose clear and pure, filling the little kitchen. And in that moment, I realized that this fight wasn't just about exposing them. It was about reclaiming something they had tried to take from both of us, our right to exist fully, joyfully, without fear. And I knew we weren't done. This was just the beginning. When I held that envelope in my hand, something shifted. The handwriting was precise, old-fashioned, almost but unfamiliar. And that photograph, Lily awkwardly leaning away from Derek's possessive hand 2 years ago, was too deliberate to ignore. The note clipped to it chilled me. "You're not done yet." I sat on the couch for what felt like an hour, staring at it, wondering who had sent it. Paul, Natalie? No. Natalie was horrified, but she didn't strike me as the type to send cryptic warnings. Paul would have just called me. I flipped the envelope over again and again, searching for a clue. Nothing. And yet a part of me felt seen. Whoever sent it, they weren't threatening me exactly. It felt more like a prod, a reminder that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. I put the photo on the coffee table and poured myself a cup of lukewarm coffee from this morning's pot, too distracted to heat it up, but desperate for something to hold something grounding. Lily was at school, blissfully unaware. She'd woken up humming that morning, finally starting to shake off the shadow of the lakehouse weekend. I couldn't let this drag her back into the dark. That note set me on edge, but it also ignited something deeper, a kind of ruthless curiosity. Someone else knew things about my family, someone who saw what I was only beginning to admit. This wasn't just one violent outburst from Derek. It was a symptom of something bigger, a sickness that had festered in our family for generations, hidden under layers of wealth, respectability, and polished smiles. I needed answers, and for once I wasn't afraid of the truth. I started with Paul. When I called, his voice was gentle but wary. "I swear, Audrey, I didn't send that photo." "I believe you," I said. "But there's more here, Paul." The documentary, did you keep any footage from before this reunion? Anything from past gatherings? He hesitated, and I could almost hear him running through mental calculations. There's stuff from your father's birthday last year. A bit from Derek's engagement party. Why? Can I see it? I asked. I think there might be patterns, things we didn't notice at the time. Paul didn't argue. Come by tonight, I'll pull what I have. That evening, once Lily was asleep, I dropped her off at Tara's apartment next door, pretending it was a grown-up errand. Tara didn't ask questions. She had learned long ago that when I was this quiet, it meant something serious. At Paul's cramped editing suite, the walls were lined with shelves of camera gear, tangled cords, and stacks of DVDs, labeled in careful handwriting. He handed me a glass of wine as we sat before his monitor. Some of this will hurt to watch, he warned. I nodded. I'm ready. And so we watched. Scene after scene of my family doing what they did best, performing warmth while weaponizing every interaction. My father's dismissive sneers disguised as advice. My mother's passive-aggressive digs wrapped in compliments. Derek's entitled smirk whenever he belittled me in front of others. But what struck me most were the small things, the way Lily shrank slightly whenever Derek was near, even before the slap. The way my parents looked the other way, pretending not to notice when he spoke to her too sharply or held her arm just a little too tight. Then came the footage from my father's birthday. A moment I hadn't remembered at all, Derek leaning down to whisper something in Lily's ear at the dinner table. Her expression froze, then she looked down, silent for the rest of the meal. I felt my stomach turn. I had been right there, laughing at something unrelated, oblivious. My heart pounded as I leaned closer to the screen. Paul, can you boost the audio on that? I asked, pointing to the clip. He frowned. I can try. He fiddled with knobs and dragged sliders around, isolating the track. After a few moments of static and distortion, Derek's voice emerged, soft but chillingly clear. Good girls are quiet, Lily. Do you want to be a good girl? That was it, but it was enough. I sat back, stunned. The slap at the reunion wasn't the first time Derek had been conditioning her. It wasn't an isolated incident, it was part of a pattern. I felt cold all over. How many times had I brushed off his behavior as just Derek being Derek? How many times had I thought my parents' favoritism toward him was merely unfair, not dangerous? A wave of guilt washed over me, sharp and suffocating. But beneath that guilt was something steel-hard and unflinching. Never again. I turned to Paul. Can you send me that clip? He nodded. At home that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, hearing Derek's voice over and over again. I knew what I had to do next, but it was risky. It meant inviting a bigger storm than anything I had faced so far. The next morning, I called Beth. I need to talk, I said simply. When we met later that day, I showed her the footage, the photograph from the envelope, everything. She watched silently, her expression grim but focused. When it ended, she looked up. This changes things, she said. Audrey, we can go beyond civil action now. This is evidence of a pattern of emotional abuse. Potential grooming. If you want, we can file for a restraining order, not just against Derek, but your parents too. My throat felt tight. Would it hold up in court? She nodded slowly. It's risky. They're powerful. Your father's connections run deep, but this is strong, very strong. I took a deep breath, then let's do it. Not just for Lily. For me too. For all the times I stayed quiet. The next few days blurred into a rush of paperwork, sworn statements, and strategy meetings. I stayed outwardly calm for Lily's sake, but inside I was bracing for war. And then the next twist arrived. A courier knocked on my door one afternoon with a thick envelope. Inside was a legal notice Derek had filed for a defamation suit against me. He claimed that by sharing the private video with family and Natalie, I had irreparably harmed his reputation and career prospects. The gall of it almost made me laugh. Almost. I handed the notice to Beth at our next meeting. She wasn't surprised. This is a counterattack, she said flatly. He's trying to intimidate you into silence, but it won't work. But it was more than legal maneuvering. It was symbolic. Derek and my parents still believed they could control the narrative, bend reality to their will. They counted on shame and fear keeping me in check. And that's when I made my next decision, my riskiest yet. I would go public, truly public. Not just private emails, not just whispered warnings. I would tell the full story, the real one, in my own words. Beth supported me but advised caution. Don't say anything that could be construed as libelous. Stick to facts. Let them hang themselves with their own words and actions. That night, after Lily went to bed, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote. Every memory, every moment I'd buried. I described the slap, the cold dismissals, the pattern of subtle manipulation and silencing. I posted a carefully written but devastatingly honest account on my blog, linking to selected clips from Paul's footage, just enough to establish truth, not enough to violate privacy laws. I hit publish at midnight. By morning, it had gone viral. Friends, acquaintances, even strangers shared my post. Messages poured in, some from people who had suspected something was off about my family, but hadn't known the extent, others from complete strangers thanking me for speaking out, saying they'd felt trapped in similar situations for years. But most surprising of all was the email I received from Natalie, a long, heartfelt apology. And a confession. She had filed for divorce from Derek the day after receiving the private video. And she offered to testify, willing to confirm under oath that Derek had a history of controlling behavior, temper issues, and disturbing comments about children. That was the final piece. The story wasn't over yet, not by a long shot, but for the first time I felt the weight shift. I was no longer just surviving, I was fighting back and winning. The anonymous email sat in my inbox like a loaded gun, quiet but heavy with potential. 19 at the beginning. The attachment was a single PDF, no explanation, no sender name. My hands trembled as I clicked it open, the glow of my laptop harsh in the dim kitchen light. Inside were scanned documents yellowed with aged newspaper clippings, a handwritten note, a faded black and white photograph of two children standing by a lake that looked eerily familiar. My stomach tightened as I realized what I was seeing. It was the same lake house where Lily and I had endured the reunion. And those two children, one was unmistakably my father, probably no older than 10. The other, a girl I didn't recognize, about the same age, wearing a sundress and a crooked grin. The headline from the newspaper clipping hit me like a punch. Local girl missing from Thompson Lake House, July 1978. I read the article twice, my mind reeling. The girl's name was Rebecca Ellison. She'd been staying at the Thompson family's summer home when she disappeared. The case had been briefly investigated, but quickly ruled an unfortunate accident. No body was ever recovered. The file closed within months. The details were hauntingly familiar. No witnesses, no evidence. A family that closed ranks around a narrative. Why had this been sent to me now? What was the connection? My father would have been a child then. Still, this felt like more than coincidence. A cold realization settled over me. This wasn't just about Derek's slap or my parents' cruelty. There was history here, dark and buried, and I was standing on the fault line. I sat back trying to breathe. Everything in me screamed to walk away, to focus on Lily, on the present, on the fight I was already waging. But another part of me, the part that had spent years pretending things weren't as bad as they were, knew better. That's how they win, I thought bitterly. They count on our exhaustion. Our desire to protect our peace becomes the weapon they use to keep their secrets hidden. So I leaned forward again and began researching. By the time Lily woke up for school, I'd learned more about Rebecca Ellison than I ever thought I would. She had been a neighbor's child, not family, but close enough to spend summers at the lake house. Her parents moved away a year after her disappearance, never speaking publicly again. The Thompson family had been interviewed only once, giving polite, rehearsed statements about tragedy and loss. The case file itself was thin, shockingly thin for a missing child. This was the culture my family had been raised in, a culture where image mattered more than truth, where tragedy could be neatly swept under an antique rug and forgotten. After dropping Lily at school, I drove straight to Paul's studio. He looked up in surprise when I walked in without calling. "Audrey, you okay?" "Not really," I admitted. "Do you have any old footage from the lake house, older than mine?" "Anything from before you married into the family?" Paul scratched his head, thoughtful. "I mean, your dad asked me years ago to digitize some old family tapes from the 70s and 80s. They're in my archive drive somewhere. Why?" I hesitated. How could I even explain? Instead, I said simply, "Can we look at them together, right now?" Paul didn't argue. He pulled up folders of grainy Super 8 footage, each clip labeled only by year. We watched hours of silent family gatherings, picnics, boat rides, birthday parties, all bathed in that golden nostalgic haze that film gives everything, no matter how sinister the reality might have been. Then we found it footage labeled Lake House 1978. There she was, Rebecca. I recognized her from the newspaper photo, her sundress blowing in the breeze as she ran down the dock. And there was my father, 10 years old, solemn even then, watching her with an intensity that made my skin crawl. And then about 15 minutes into the reel, a moment that froze me. Rebecca standing at the edge of the dock, waving to someone off camera, and my father stepping forward. Too close. The film cut abruptly there, mid-motion. I felt my throat close. "Is that all there is?" I asked, my voice tight. Paul nodded slowly. "That's all that was on the tape. The rest is blank." "Did you notice how the cut was right before something happened?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I left Paul's studio with a copy of that clip on a thumb drive and my head spinning. There was no direct evidence of wrongdoing, just a feeling and implication. But it fit too perfectly, too eerily. My father had grown up learning how to obscure, how to rewrite history to suit the family's needs. He'd learned it young. I drove aimlessly for a while before parking at Willow Creek Park, the same place my dad had come to rescue me after Laura's rejection on Christmas Eve. I sat on a bench, watching the frozen pond and feeling both grateful for that night and haunted by what I now suspected. What if my dad's capacity for loyalty had a darker flip side? What if he had always been capable of bearing inconvenient truths, not just about Derek's cruelty, but about his own past? The park's bare trees swayed gently, their stark branches cutting against the pale winter sky. I realized then that this was bigger than me. This wasn't just about justice for Lily or revenge against my family's toxicity. This was about breaking a generational pattern, a sickness that had festered too long. I needed to confront my father. That night, after Lily was asleep, I dialed his number. His voice was warm but cautious when he picked up. "Audrey, I didn't expect to hear from you so soon." "I need to see you," I said. "Tomorrow, no excuses." There was a pause, then quietly, "Okay, my play?" "No, the lakehouse. Meet me there, noon." A longer pause this time, "The lakehouse." "Yes," I said, "that's where this ends." His voice dropped to a whisper. "You've been looking into things." I didn't respond, I didn't have to. "Okay," he said, he said finally. "No." The next day, I packed a bag for Lily and dropped her off with Tara again, making up a story about work meetings. As I drove to the lake house, memories came flooding back, Lily laughing by the dock, my mother's brittle smile, Derek's smirk. But beneath those memories was something darker, more ancient. I saw it now for what it was, a place that had swallowed truth for generations. When I pulled into the circular driveway, my father was already there, standing by the front steps in his immaculate overcoat, looking smaller than I remembered. Inside, the house felt cold despite the heat running. Dust motes floated in the shafts of pale light cutting through the curtains. My father sat down heavily on one of the armchairs in the great room and gestured for me to sit across from him. "I know why you called me here," he said quietly. "And I know you're not going to like what I have to say." "Then start talking," I said. His face crumpled a little, not with sadness, but with exhaustion. "Rebecca wasn't an accident," he said. "Not exactly." My heart pounded. "We were kids," he continued. "But Derek wasn't the first monster in this family, Audrey. Our father, your grandfather, was worse. He shaped us, made us cruel, taught us that appearance was everything, that weakness couldn't be tolerated. That summer, Rebecca saw something she shouldn't have. And when she tried to tell someone, he made her disappear. I stared at him, horror blooming in my chest. And you kept that secret your entire life." He nodded slowly. "We all did. And in keeping it, we became him. I thought I escaped it by being better, by becoming respectable. But I see now I didn't stop it. I just passed it along." Silence hung between us, heavy and brittle. "You think this is an apology?" I asked finally, my voice shaking. "You think telling me this makes it okay?" "No," he said simply. "But you deserve to know, and now you can end it. You can decide what happens next." I stood up trembling. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to collapse. But most of all, I felt clarity, a brutal, liberating clarity. "You're right," I said quietly. "It does end with me." The message, simple, chilling, sat on my screen like an accusation. "He didn't tell you everything. Look under the floorboards of the boathouse." My fingers hovered over my phone for a long moment, my heart pounding in my chest. Outside, the lake reflected the gray winter sky, flat and cold. My father's confession had cracked open a terrible history, but this was something deeper, something he hadn't admitted, and I couldn't look away. I pocketed my phone, steeling myself. The wind bit at my face as I crossed the brittle grass toward the boathouse at the edge of the water. Every step felt heavier than the last. The boathouse had always seemed inconsequential, a place to store dusty paddles and spider-webbed life jackets. But now it loomed, its weathered boards and peeling paint suddenly sinister. Inside, it smelled of mildew and lake water, the scent of childhood summers twisted into something sour. The floor creaked under my boots as I knelt, scanning for loose boards. It didn't take long. Near the far corner, half hidden beneath a tarp and an old oar, was a plank slightly raised at one end. My fingers shook as I pried it up. Beneath was a small hollow space, maybe 3 feet deep, and inside it, a box. I pulled it out carefully, heart racing. It was an old wooden chest, no lock, just a tarnished brass latch. My breath fogged in the cold air as I flipped it open. Inside, wrapped in yellowed cloth, were objects that didn't belong together. An odd, chilling collection that told its own story. A girl's hair ribbon, sun-bleached and frayed. A rusted bracelet with a child's initials, R.E. A small notebook with faded ink scrawled across its cover. Rebecca Ellison's belongings. But there was more. At the bottom of the box beneath the notebook was a photo, another old black and white image. My father, as a boy, standing beside a man I didn't recognize. The man's face was harsh, eyes narrowed, his hand gripping my father's shoulder tightly enough that even in the photo it looked painful. Scribbled on the back of the photograph were words that made my stomach drop. Father and son, 19th. 88. The last lesson. The symbolism hit me all at once. This wasn't just evidence of Rebecca's disappearance. This was evidence of a pattern, a legacy of violence stretching back generations. My grandfather, the man none of us spoke of much, had taught my father how to hide, how to lie, how to protect the family's reputation at all costs. It explained so much and yet left me reeling. I sat there for a long time, the box on my lap, the cold seeping into my bones. I thought about what it meant to inherit trauma, to carry the weight of secrets you didn't even know you were holding. My father hadn't invented this cruelty, he'd inherited it. But knowing that didn't absolve him. It didn't erase what had been done to Rebecca, to me, to Lily. I could feel the generational rot woven into every creak of this boathouse, every warped plank. This was where it lived, quiet and undisturbed, just waiting for someone to look closely enough. I took a photo of everything in the box, careful to document every item. Then I carefully closed the lid and set it back exactly as I'd found it. I wasn't going to remove the evidence physically. That felt too dangerous, too easy to explain away if someone decided to twist this narrative further. But I had my photos, now proof of not just my family's violence, but its history, its legacy. Walking back toward the house, I called Beth. I found something, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Her tone sharpened instantly. Where are you? The lakehouse. The boathouse, actually. Beth, this goes deeper than we thought. There's a history here. My grandfather, Rebecca Ellison, wasn't an accident. A pause, then measured and calm, she said, "Come straight to my office. Don't stop anywhere else." And Audrey, don't tell anyone else what you found. Not yet. I promised I would, but as I passed the lakehouse, I froze. The front curtain moved just slightly, like someone had been watching. I backed away slowly, suddenly hyper-aware of how exposed I was, how alone. The driveway was empty, but that didn't reassure me. Someone knew I'd gone into that boathouse. Maybe my father hadn't left yet. Maybe someone else had been here all along. It felt like the past was watching me. The drive back to the city was a blur. My mind spun as I replayed my father's words in the great room. The weight of the box in my hands, that photograph, the grip on his shoulder, the look in my grandfather's eyes. It was a cycle, abuse wrapped in duty control disguised as legacy. By the time I reached Beth's office, night had fallen and the city lights glowed sharp and cold. Beth ushered me in without a word and locked the door behind me. In her office, I laid my phone on the table and showed her the photos I'd taken. She scrolled slowly, her expression unreadable. When she reached the image of my father and grandfather, she stopped. "Audrey," she said carefully, "your grandfather, did you ever meet him?" "Not really. He died when I was little. I have no real memory of him." Beth tapped the photo gently. "You may need to dig further into public records. There's a chance there could be old reports, things the family suppressed." I felt exhausted but focused. What do we do next? Beth's eyes met mine, clear and resolute. "We go beyond family court. If what you're showing me suggests a pattern that spans generations, we're talking about something criminal. Something the police may be able to reopen." My stomach turned at the thought of detectives picking over the remnants of my family's history. But I also felt a strange sense of relief. Maybe it's finally time to tear this whole facade down. Before I could respond, Beth's phone rang. She frowned at the screen. "It's a blocked number," she said. Then after a beat, she answered. I watched as her face paled. Yes, she's here," she said cautiously. Who is this?" A pause. Then her eyes met mine and she mouthed, "Your father." My blood ran cold. Beth listened for a moment longer, then hung up slowly. "He knows you went into the boathouse," she said quietly. He said to tell you he's leaving town, that you've won." But Audrey, his tone, it didn't sound like defeat. It sounded like permission. I sat back, my heart racing. Permission for what? I felt suddenly like this whole thing was moving faster than I could control, like I'd stirred something ancient and ugly, and it wasn't going to stop just because I'd uncovered the truth. My father wasn't a man to simply concede. And then Beth's phone buzzed again, this time with a text. She read it aloud. "The past is buried where it belongs. Tell her not to dig too deep." The text on Beth's phone felt like a dare wrapped in a threat. "The past is buried where it belongs. Tell her not to dig too deep." I sat in her office staring at it, feeling the weight of generations of secrecy pressed down on my shoulders. But where fear might have overtaken me once, now it only hardened my resolve. My father could run, could bluff, could try to scare me into retreat, but I had already crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I spent that night lying awake, the old photo of my father and grandfather burned into my mind. The last lesson the back had read. What lesson was that exactly? What had they covered up together all those years ago? My grandfather wasn't just a ghost in family stories. Now he was a key, a link in this twisted chain. And I knew what I needed: records. Facts. Proof that this darkness didn't begin or end with me. The next morning, I called the Ridgeview County Records Office, the tiny courthouse where all property deeds, death certificates, and archived documents from the area were stored. The clerk sounded skeptical when I explained what I was looking for. Old hospital records, ma'am. From 1978, you're gonna need a court order for anything private. But I wasn't looking for private files yet, not medical records, not sealed reports. I wanted public records first. I wanted to trace Rebecca Ellison's name across whatever fragments of history I could. Fine, I told the clerk. I'll be there when you open. Beth agreed to meet me at the courthouse. When we arrived, the records clerk handed me a stack of dusty boxes, shrugging. Whatever we've got is in here, he muttered. Good luck. We sat at a wooden table under flickering fluorescent lights as I sifted through brittle papers and faded microfiche. Beth worked quietly beside me, occasionally handing me files she thought might matter. It was slow, exhausting work, but after hours of digging, I found it. A birth certificate. Rebecca Ellison, born June 11th, 1968, mother Margaret Ellison, father unknown. I paused. Unknown. That seemed odd for a small town where everyone knew everyone. I checked the address listed on the certificate. It matched a cottage just down the road from the Thompson Lakehouse. Beth leaned over my shoulder. Try looking for any legal documents tied to the Ellison name, she suggested. Wills, guardianships, anything. I followed her lead, and that's when I saw it. A guardianship document dated September 1978, 2 months after Rebecca's disappearance. It listed a petition to transfer guardianship of an unidentified minor to a relative of the child's biological father. But there was no name on the father's line. The petitioner, Gerald Thompson, my grandfather. My breath caught. Gerald Thompson had filed a guardianship petite. I sat back, my mind spinning. Beth, I whispered, what if Rebecca didn't die? What if they hit her? What if she had a child? Beth's expression darkened as she put the pieces together. Are you saying your grandfather might have fathered Rebecca's child? The idea felt monstrous, but it fit. Suddenly the secrecy made sense. Suddenly my father's evasiveness, his warnings not to dig too deep, it all aligned with a truth even darker than I'd imagined. What happened to that child? I asked, my voice hollow. Beth grabbed her laptop, typing quickly. She checked adoption records, old census reports, whatever she could access. And then after a long silence, she turned the screen toward me. Look at this. A faded record from 1979, a legal name change. Infant Ellison listed as adopted by a family from out of state. The new name, Paul Carter. My stomach flipped. Paul, the filmmaker, my cousin, my closest ally in this entire ordeal. I felt my world tilt beneath me. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back to that very first anonymous email, "You're not done yet." It had come from Paul. Suddenly, every late-night conversation, every look of understanding, every "I'm so sorry" took on a new, sharper edge. He had known something all along, not everything, maybe, but enough. And he had been pulling strings behind the scenes, guiding me toward this truth while hiding his own connection to it. I have to talk to him, I said, standing abruptly. Beth grabbed my arm gently. Audrey, slow down. This changes everything. You need to think about how you approach this. But I couldn't wait. I left the courthouse heart racing and drove straight to Paul's studio. He wasn't there. The door was locked, the windows dark. I texted him no reply. I called straight to voicemail. Panic edged into my thoughts, but I pushed it down. Instead, I drove back to my apartment. Lily was still at school. Tara had taken her for an after-school playdate. I sat in my living room staring at my phone, willing Paul to call me back. Hours passed. Finally, just before sunset, my doorbell rang. My heart leapt and then plummeted when I opened the door. It wasn't Paul. It was Natalie. She looked exhausted, her makeup smudged, her hair pulled back hastily. Audrey, she said breathlessly, I didn't know where else to go. You need to know something. About Paul. I stepped aside, letting her in without a word. She sat on my couch, wringing her hands. After I filed for divorce from Derek, she began, Paul contacted me. He said he wanted to help me, that he'd been watching your family for years. At first, I thought he just meant because he was married in. But then, he said something strange. He said your family ruined his life before he was even born. My pulse quickened. He told you that? She nodded. He didn't explain. But he was obsessed, Audrey. Obsessed with exposing all of you. He showed me old footage I didn't even know existed. Stuff from before he met you. My mind reeled. Paul hadn't just stumbled into this story, he had engineered it. He had used me as much as I had leaned on him. Natalie leaned forward, her voice urgent. I think he's not done yet. I think he's planning something. I think he's trying to make sure your family pays for everything. But Audrey, he's not just after Derek or your parents. He's after you too. A cold dread settled over me. Natalie reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. He gave me this. Told me to give it to you if I ever felt scared. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single scrap of paper. Written in Paul's precise handwriting were 5 words: check your mother's grave tonight. Story 2, I'm Alex Chen, 31, and last Tuesday night, I got a message that blew my world apart. It was from Sabrina, my fiancée of 3 years, and it wasn't words, it was a video. In it, she was on a little cruiser in Santorini wearing my anniversary dress. She was kissing some handsome Italian guy I'd never met. He had dark hair, a tailored blazer, and a smile that said he knew exactly what he was doing. I watched it twice. Then I sat on my couch in disbelief, clutching the emerald ring I'd inherited from my grandmother. My mind went back 6 months. That was when I proposed. I'd scraped together most of my savings to buy a custom ring, a deep green emerald set in rose gold just like Grandma's. Zoe Carrington, our wedding planner, and an old college friend had warned me it was risky, but Sabrina always said she hated boring diamonds. I thought I'd nailed it. I remember how her eyes lit up that night like the first line of code finally compiling. We met at a midnight hackathon. I was leading the back-end team for Ridgeway Tech. She was head of front-end at Pixelwave. Our organizers merged us halfway through because they thought our projects fit. I still laugh remembering how Mark Caldwell, my roommate and teammate, got roped into our endless debates about database schemas versus CSS frameworks. By hour 36, we were all delirious and somehow ended up celebrating our MVP award in the server room with a bottle of warm soda and a kiss I didn't even see coming. Fast forward to last month, Sabrina flew off to Rome and Mykonos for a girls' reconnection trip with her college friends Lana, Mia, and Sophia. I really wanted to go. My deadline at Ridgeway was brutal, though. Priya Kapoor, my travel agent friend, offered to rebook my tickets on a moment's notice, but I told her no. I'd been looking forward to a quiet weekend with them once the wedding invites went out. Instead, I stayed home grinding through Python scripts while Sabrina packed that emerald green silk dress I'd bought her. I remember how I imagined her smiling in narrow alleys, twirling under fairy lights, taking endless selfies for Instagram. I even texted her a photo of me wearing the tuxedo I'd ordered for our engagement shoot. Save me some gelato? Yeah. She replied with a string of heart emojis and sent me a snap of her boarding pass. Everything looked perfect. At least that's what I thought. Then came the video. I was debugging at my desk when my phone buzzed. The notification said video message from Sab. I braced myself for shaky footage of her showing off the Trevi fountain at 2 a.m. Maybe tipsy, maybe funny. Instead, it was her. In my dress. Wrapping her arms around this guy with a golden tan and a name tag that read Capri Charters. They were pressing close under the moonlight, my green dress catching every glint of the yacht's floodlights. She smiled at the camera and mouthed, "Meet Matteo." He treats me right. My chest tightened. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. And then just as I was trying to process, my phone dinged again. A text from her found someone who actually values me. He owns 3 companies and a yacht. Enjoy your cramped apartment and your code. Been fun. Rings on your table. Scrap it for cash. I stared at it. 3 years. 3 years of trust late-night talks about APIs and architecture, thinking we were building something real. And she ends it with a video of her betrayal in a single text. I felt a rage boil up, but oddly I stayed calm. I didn't text back, I didn't call, I just sat there breathing deeply. That quiet moment of clarity came when I thought of the last few months. How she'd guarded her phone like it was nuclear. How she'd stayed late at front-end meetups for networking, then come home smelling like expensive soap. How she'd complained about our tiny one-bedroom in Eastwood, my beautiful apartment that I'd spent weekends fixing up. I remembered seeing her on Instagram tagging perfect cafe shots with work trip, always glossing over where she really was. Then I recalled my airline login I'd bought her return ticket on my corporate status account. It was time. I logged into the airline portal. It took 3 clicks to cancel her flight home. No alerts, no calls, just a silent void where her booking had been. Next, I went to our joint bank account online. There it was small withdrawals over the past 6 months, $200 here, $300 there, enough to hint she'd been siphoning money off for this trip. And the joint credit card maxed out on luxury linens, who knows what, and that emerald green dress she wore in the video. I grabbed my phone again and called Palazzo Mare, the boutique hotel in Santorini where she'd booked her stay. The manager, Luigi, answered with a friendly buonasera. I told him there'd been an issue with the card on file and that he'd need a new authorization tomorrow or she'd have to check out. He sympathized, shook his head, and agreed. No muss, no fuss. By then it was 2 a.m. I hadn't slept. I sank onto my couch, looking at the empty dress hanging in my closet and the ring sitting on the console. My phone buzzed 10 times, missed calls, angry voicemails, panicked texts from Sabrina begging for help. She said the manager was threatening police that she'd sold her Rolex to cover one more night, that she was stranded and scared and alone. Each message chipped away at my anger until I realized just how clear I could think when I wasn't blinded by betrayal. I took screenshots of everything, the video, her final text, her cries for money. I emailed them to myself on a burner account and backed them up in the cloud. Then I messaged Mark Pack a bag. I need advice. And ice cream. He replied within seconds. On my way. Bring the whiskey. His loyalty was immediate. That belt and suspender support helped me feel human again. The ring stayed where it was on my desk, gleaming with promise and pain. The dress still hung in the closet, and me, I was sitting in the quiet aftermath of a perfect storm. I'd cut her off at the Source Flight Hotel funds, but that was only step one. I knew there was more to uncover. Call logs, DMs, hidden accounts. Sabrina had been planning this for months, and now so was I. I poured a glass of whiskey, put on some music, and set my sights on part 2 of this saga. Because you don't just get a breakup like this and walk away. You strategize, you document, you build an arsenal of evidence. And most important, you reclaim your peace. This was after midnight. The worst was over, the quiet before the storm. And I, Alex Chen, was just getting started. Mark showed up at 3 a.m. with a bottle of whiskey and a fatigued grin. I'd texted him an hour before need backup for an emergent harassment case, and here he was settling onto my couch beside the scattered scraps of our evidence. I laid out the flight cancellation screenshots, the bank statements showing her quiet withdrawals, and that video of Sabrina in my emerald green dress on the cruiser. Then I told him about the secret phone I'd discovered in her yoga bag, and how I'd breached its cloud backup. It felt ethically gray, but after betrayal you justify anything to find the truth. In those folders were months of DMs between her and Mateo, plotting dates and fantasizing about a better life. Each message calling me a loving code monkey who didn't understand real ambition stung like acid, but it also ignited a fire in me. I remembered Dad's words in our cramped study code is binary. Life isn't. Learn the logic so you can manage chaos. So I pored over photo timestamps, spotted the same chipped coffee mug in her Santorini selfies that sits in our kitchen, and collected every breadcrumb she thought she'd hidden. Every symbol, my grandmother's emerald, the silk dress, that gelato cone had been weaponized against me, but they backfired spectacularly. In that dim room, I felt fury turn to focus. I wasn't a victim waiting for justice. I was a strategist crafting my counterstrike. But that hack alone wasn't enough to expose her final secret, and I knew the next move would have to be bolder. In the gray light of dawn, I launched Phase 2, turning her world upside down. I used the MAC address from that secret phone to triangulate its last known hotspot, her friend's villa 2 miles from the marina, and tapped into an online community that specializes in digital footprinting. Within hours, I'd traced Mateo's charter company registration number to Capri Charters, a half-legit, half-hustle family outfit. Posing as a travel writer, I called Profiling Luxury Yacht Experiences Insider Scoop on Captain Mateo. The reply came bluntly, he's here, but don't expect yachts or investors, just selfie ops for tourists. That cut deep. While Sabrina pitched him as a modern Casanova with 3 companies, he was a carnival barker selling illusions. I felt a pang of pity both for her gullibility and the emptiness of a life built on glittering lies. Ambition without integrity is like code without comments, unreadable and dangerous. I grabbed screenshots of our exchange and the scraped company data, then forwarded everything to Land's Hotel back in Eastwood, flagging his shady credentials to their legal team. They thanked me for identifying a potential fraudster and promised to watch out for chargebacks. As I closed my laptop, I realized Sabrina hadn't just chased a man, she chased an idea sold by influencer culture, a promise that luxury equals worth. That twisted realization closed the first act of my counterattack and opened another. By evening, whispers of our drama trailed me into a coffee shop. Isn't that the guy whose fiancée ran off to Greece? I felt exposed, but I had more to do. I called Sabrina's father, Gregory, under the guise of a concerned fiancé. His voice trembled when I described her video and my discoveries. I heard muffled sobs in the background. He admitted they'd always admired my stability, but worried Sabrina saw me as too safe, too predictable. My heart sank. Predictability had become a crime. Between hushed apologies, he promised they'd handle her. I agreed, though I knew it meant they'd bail her out. Symbolically, my grandmother's ring felt like a millstone around my neck. I climbed to the rooftop, Eastwood's neon skyline flickering like unfinished code, random, beautiful, alive. I slipped the ring off, turning it in my palm until the facets caught a stray streetlight. Could an heirloom carry the weight of disillusionment? I didn't wait for an answer. I laid it on the ledge, a silent monument to a love that fractured. The wind tugged at my jacket as I descended the fire escape, and when I reached the ground, the ring was gone, snatched by night's breeze or something darker. I wasn't prepared for that twist, and I didn't know who or what had taken it. Morning came with an empty finger's worth of velvet lining where that ring had rested. I scanned the CCTV footage from the fire escape camera. A shadow flickered past, tall and unhurried, resembling someone in Sabrina's coat. My blood ran cold. Had she come back, or was someone else reclaiming my family's heirloom? I reached out to Priya, a cyber forensic analyst, with one message. Run pattern detection on security cams within 2 blocks. Her reply arrived with a still frame of a hooded figure descending the fire escape in slow motion. It confirmed my suspicion someone was playing their own game with my ruins. Then an email popped in from the law firm. Representing Sabrina, they demanded her ring's return at once or threatened suit for emotional distress. Irony struck, she lost my ring and now she wanted it back. I shot off a curt reply, "Come get it," attaching the screenshot of her Santorini text. A calm settled over me that surprised me. Minutes later, I tore open another envelope from the courthouse, a preliminary injunction alleging I'd unlawfully evicted her and destroyed her property. The language was clinical, but the threat was real. A public trial could bury me in fees and publicity. I called my lawyer friend Ella, but her voicemail said she'd be in court all day. I thought of the ring, the dress, the plane ticket, each a casualty of this war. Dad's voice echoed again, "Never surrender the narrative." With trembling fingers, I tapped out a text, "Meet me at my place. Bring backup." I stared at the screen, heart hammering because I realized I'd crossed a line, and I didn't know if I could face the fallout. Ella's message arrived at 10 p.m., her usual calm tone cutting through my mounting anxiety. "I've got your back," she said. Just 4 words, but they carried the weight of a lifetime of friendship. For the first time in days, I allowed myself a breath. My lawyer wasn't just some back-office advisor. She was the kind of person who wouldn't flinch when the stakes got real. I forwarded her the injunction, my phone buzzing as I refocused on the mess Sabrina had left behind. But as I sank back into my chair trying to process everything, it hit me this wasn't just a breakup anymore. It wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was a reckoning. Sabrina's betrayal wasn't just about her stepping out on me, it was about everything I'd invested into this relationship. The love, the sacrifices, the quiet hours of code that I thought we were both contributing to. All of that had been consumed by her hunger for more, for status, for things that were supposed to be signs of success, but only revealed her emptiness. Her desire for a life made of expensive handbags and perfect Instagram photos had clouded her perception of what truly mattered. Partnership, mutual respect, trust. She was playing by a different set of rules, one that prioritized wealth and luxury over integrity and loyalty. She had never once questioned that what she was doing was wrong. I think she believed she could always just walk away from the damage without facing the consequences. The next morning, I called in sick to work. There was too much at stake, too much unraveling. I spent the entire day sitting in front of my laptop, flicking through Sabrina's past, carefully piecing together the puzzle she'd tried so hard to keep hidden. I found more than just the DMs and hotel receipts. There were online purchases, luxury items tagged with specific notes, like for the trip with Matteo, and a meticulously curated list of destinations in Europe she'd planned to visit on her own without me. I hadn't realized just how much she'd planned this whole thing, how she'd created a parallel life without me in it. The dress, the ring, the trips. They were all symbols of the life she'd discarded, each item reflecting her desire to be seen in a different light. But what I began to see in the process was that I wasn't just the one left behind. The entire system she'd built was a house of cards, fragile, self-serving, and empty. In the end, I wasn't the only one losing. She had sacrificed everything, love, trust, and her sense of identity for an illusion of success. And there, in the silent hours of the afternoon, it struck me I was already free. I no longer needed to prove my worth to her or anyone else. I didn't need her validation. The weight of that realization was both liberating and terrifying. My world had shifted without me realizing it, and now I stood on the precipice looking at everything that was left. It felt like staring at an open window in the middle of a storm, unsure whether to close it or step through. Ella arrived by evening with a stack of legal papers in hand, and we began strategizing. The quiet tension of the night had already seeped into my bones. We were setting the groundwork for the battle ahead, but all I could think about was what Sabrina's face would look like when everything came crashing down. Would she try to twist the story to her advantage? Would she play the victim, making me out to be the villain in front of everyone we knew? The fear that hung over me was less about the legal fight and more about how everyone would perceive this. Sabrina was a master at manipulation, but I wasn't a fool anymore. I had the receipts. I had the proof. It was all a game of patience now, waiting for her next move. The phone buzzed again. It was a message from my mom. I've spoken to Bob. He's still upset with you for sending the video. My mom and Bob had always gotten along, but I could sense the weight in her words. Bob, Sabrina's father, had been a good man, a man of integrity, but his loyalty was blinding him to the truth of his daughter's actions. I didn't respond right away, but I knew I had to prepare myself for whatever conversation awaited me. The tricky part was going to be handling Diane, Sabrina's mother. She had always been a thorn in my side, subtly critical, always pushing for more. The words she'd said about my lack of ambition had stung, but now they felt almost like a prelude to the game Sabrina was playing. Her parents were the ones who had enabled her behavior, perhaps unwittingly. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about a relationship falling apart. It was about the influence of a certain worldview that values material success over all else. Sabrina's family had raised her to chase status above all things, to see people not for who they were, but for what they could offer. To them, love was a transactional thing, just another line in a ledger. It was the world she was raised in, the world of appearances, of showing off. But I couldn't fight against the weight of her family's expectations alone. I had to think beyond the legal drama and confront the real issue. Sabrina had been raised to believe that love wasn't enough. And that was a battle I wasn't sure I was ready to fight. A knock on the door snapped me out of my thoughts. Mark entered holding a bottle of wine. "I thought we could use a little distraction," he said, flashing a rare grin. We both knew the game wasn't over yet, but for tonight, we'd share this small victory of silence. I poured a glass and stared at the streetlights from the window, my mind racing with every possible scenario. How long would she play the "I'm the victim" card? Would she show up at my door again, pleading for forgiveness, or would she just slink back into her shallow world, never facing what she'd done? The truth is, I was no longer afraid of her. What I feared now was the quiet aftermath, the emptiness of everything we'd shared, the looming question of whether I could ever trust again, not just in love, but in the idea of love. Could I build something real from this wreckage? Was there even room in my heart for that anymore? The night slipped by the weight of all that remained pressing on me. Tomorrow I would face Sabrina again. But this time it wouldn't be about saving her or salvaging what we had. This time it was about standing up for what was mine and walking away from everything that had tried to tear me down. The game had just begun. The day Sabrina came back to Eastwood felt like the calm before a storm, but with an eerie stillness hanging over everything. I'd made sure to mentally prepare myself. No more second-guessing, no more guilt. I'd done nothing wrong. This was her doing, not mine. Yet when I stood in front of the mirror that morning, I couldn't shake the sense that something had changed inside me. Maybe it was the exhaustion that had settled in my bones over the last few days, or maybe it was just the realization that I was, for the first time, no longer the person I thought I was. She had peeled away layers of my identity, forcing me to confront everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and loyalty. The life I thought I had been building now felt like it had been constructed on sand, temporary and fragile, ready to collapse at the first sign of a storm. I stood in my apartment, staring at the dress she'd left behind, folded neatly in the back of the closet like a relic of a life that no longer existed. The deep green of the silk felt like a wound now, not the symbol of affection it once was. It reminded me of how easily she'd discarded everything we shared, as though it were disposable. As though I were disposable. That thought haunted me, but I knew better than to let it control me. I'd given Sabrina my best, and she'd thrown it all away. I wasn't about to chase her through the wreckage. The day of reckoning was near, and I was ready. The knock on my door that afternoon wasn't unexpected. I could feel it in the air as the day dragged on, heavy, thick with anticipation. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. Sabrina's footsteps had always sounded different from anyone else's, a slight tap of desperation hidden beneath the confident stride. I took a deep breath, walking toward the door, slowly, as if I could prolong the inevitable confrontation. I opened it, and there she was. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face pale from what I guessed had been days of crying, or some other calculated emotional ploy. She stood there in silence for a moment, probably assessing whether I'd show any signs of weakness. "I came to get my things," she said, her voice flat, almost rehearsed, but I could see the cracks in her facade. She wasn't the confident woman she'd once been, at least not the way she had once sold herself to me. This was the woman who had broken something precious and now had to face the consequences of her actions. But I wasn't going to make this easy for her. Not anymore. I stepped aside and let her in, but I didn't say a word. She moved like she had a script running in her head, opening drawers, glancing around for what was hers, but I couldn't help but notice how everything had changed. The place had once been our home, quiet, lived in, comfortable, but now it felt like a shell. Something hollowed out, waiting to be abandoned. She gathered her things, but she didn't touch anything of value, the things that we'd invested in together. The new kitchen gadgets, the expensive speakers we'd picked out for the living room, they were all still here untouched. She took only the bare essentials, her clothes, her toiletries. A perfect metaphor for how little she had truly cared about what we'd built. As she moved toward the door, she paused. Her fingers brushed the edge of the countertop and she took a deep breath. I could see her fighting to find the words, but there was nothing left to say. The damage had already been done. But still she tried. "You know you were never the one I wanted to be with," she muttered, almost as though speaking to herself, but loud enough for me to hear. I could have snapped, could have raged at her, but instead I stayed silent, watching her taking in every word. She thought she was the one who had power here, the one who was in control, but she couldn't even see how weak she had become. It wasn't about love anymore, it wasn't even about revenge. This was about understanding the game she had been playing all along and realizing I was no longer part of it. "You were just comfortable," she continued, her voice gaining a little more strength. "I wanted more. I want more, Alex. I don't want this life of mediocrity, of compromise. I don't want to be stuck here with you." And in that moment, I felt a pang of sadness. Not for the woman standing before me, but for the world she had chosen to live in, a world where success and material wealth were everything. A world that told her love was nothing more than a stepping stone on the way to a bigger, better version of herself. I had tried to fit into that world once, but I realized now that I wasn't the one who had been deluded. She was. She looked at me then, her gaze sharp, calculating, and I saw a flicker of something behind her eyes. Fear, maybe? The fear that comes when someone realizes they've made a mistake so large they can never undo it. But she didn't apologize. She never did. Instead, she turned and walked out as if the weight of our past had already been shed like a heavy coat. I closed the door behind her, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the pressure release. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't anything but free. The walls that had once felt like a prison now stood as quiet sentinels guarding nothing but memories. She had wanted more, but in the end, she had lost everything. She had chased a dream of luxury and success, thinking that it could replace the quiet, honest things we had shared. But none of that was real. Not really. As the hours passed, I found myself sitting on the couch, staring at the empty space where her things had been. The emptiness wasn't so bad anymore. It was just a reminder of how far I'd come, how much I'd grown. I'd been forced to shed the parts of me that had been afraid to stand up for myself, to speak my truth. But now all that was left was clarity. I could see things for what they were, not for what I had hoped they would be. And then just as I thought I could put this chapter behind me, my phone buzzed. A message from Bob. "I know this has been hard on everyone, but I need you to know. Diane and I, we've talked. We understand now. We've been blind to what's really been happening with Sabrina." "I'm sorry, Alex." I stared at the screen, the words slowly sinking in. Bob, the man I had respected for so long, now saw the truth. It wasn't about forgiving Sabrina or about reconciling with her. It was about understanding that I had never been the problem. I had been the one willing to fight for something real while she had been playing a game with no rules. But as I read the message again, something strange hit me. I didn't need their apology. This was my victory, my journey. And no one, not even Sabrina or her parents, could take that from me. It wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming myself, understanding that I was worth more than the lies she had told herself. And that was worth more than any apology. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Sabrina. But this time I didn't need to read it. I had already moved on. The life she had tried to build, the illusion of grandeur. It was gone, a mirage fading under the harsh light of truth. I had learned that I didn't need her or anyone to define my worth. I was enough. And with that, I turned off my phone, settled back into the silence of my apartment, and finally allowed myself to breathe.